The statement, delivered by Christian Peter, CEO of Peter Enterprises, wasn't just a challenge. It was a public humiliation. His gaze, sharp and dismissive, swept over me. Arthur Finch, the janitor. The grand foyer of Peter Manor, a testament to inherited wealth and ruthless acquisition, felt like a gilded cage. Sunlight, filtered through stained-glass windows depicting scenes of conquest and dominance, illuminated dust motes dancing in the air, mocking the impossibility of the task. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the suffocating silence that had fallen over the assembled guests. Christian Peter, a man whose empire was built on a foundation of broken deals and crushed competitors, clearly saw me as another obstacle to be swept aside, another insignificant cog in his meticulously crafted world. His proposal, meant as a cruel joke, was a reflection of his arrogance, his utter belief in his own superiority. He expected tears, a breakdown, a complete surrender to his power. He saw a janitor, a man invisible, a man whose sole purpose was to scrub away the dirt and grime of lives far more important than his own. He saw the worn overalls, the calloused hands, the slight stoop in my shoulders from years of physical labor. He saw everything but the man beneath the uniform. You can't be serious," I managed, my voice raspy, betraying the tremor I was desperately trying to suppress. A ripple of laughter, low and condescending, swept through the onlookers. Christian Peter's smirk widened. "Oh, but I am, Arthur, dead serious. 1 hour. This entire manor. Every speck of dust, every smudge, every misplaced cushion. Clean it. Present it to me in pristine condition within 60 minutes. Fail, and you're not just out of a job, but you'll be blacklisted from every reputable establishment in this city. Succeed." He paused, letting the implication hang in the air, a macabre promise. "Succeed, and I'll marry you." A contract, Arthur. Signed, sealed, delivered. He gestured to a document on a nearby mahogany table, embossed with the Peter Enterprises crest. The room collectively held its breath. This wasn't just about a job or a humiliating dare. This was about pride, about status, about Christian Peter's insatiable need to prove his absolute control. He thrived on spectacle, on crushing the spirit of anyone who dared to cross him, or even simply existed in his periphery without his explicit permission. My presence here, at this exclusive party, was an anomaly. I'd been called in by the estate manager, a man I'd known for years, to handle a sudden, unexpected spill in the ballroom just before the guests arrived. A clumsy waiter, a tray of red wine, a priceless antique rug, the usual chaos that came with these affairs. I'd done my job efficiently, silently, and was about to slip away unnoticed when Christian Peter had intercepted me. He'd spotted me by the service entrance, a stark contrast to the polished patrons, and had seized the opportunity for his twisted amusement. My mind raced, a desperate scramble for logic in a sea of madness. An hour? This place was a labyrinth of rooms, each one larger and more intricate than the last. There were ballrooms, libraries, drawing rooms, dining halls, countless bedrooms, a conservatory, a wine cellar. The sheer scale was overwhelming. And the cleaning supplies I had were basic: a mop, a bucket, some multi-surface spray, a duster, and a vacuum cleaner. Not exactly the arsenal required to tackle a sprawling mansion. Christian Peter's eyes, the color of a winter storm, bored into mine, searching for any flicker of weakness. He expected me to crumble. He wanted to see me beg, to witness my spirit shatter under the weight of his impossible demand. But something shifted within me. Years of subservience, of being overlooked, of enduring casual cruelties from men like Christian Peter, had forged a resilience within me. It was a quiet strength, a stubborn refusal to be defined by their contempt. His challenge, meant to humiliate, was also an unintended gift. It was a chance to shatter his perception, to reveal that the janitor was more than just a uniform and a mop. "You think this is a joke?" I said, my voice finding a new steadiness, a resonance that surprised even myself. "You think you can break me with your words and your money? You're wrong." Christian Peter's smile faltered slightly. He wasn't accustomed to defiance, especially not from someone he considered beneath him. The guests, sensing a shift in the atmosphere, leaned in, their initial amusement replaced by a palpable curiosity. They had come for entertainment, and Christian Peter was about to provide it, though perhaps not in the way he intended. "You underestimate me, Mr. Peter," I continued, stepping forward, my movements deliberate, no longer hesitant. The polished marble floor reflected my worn boots, a stark contrast to the designer footwear surrounding me. "You see a janitor. You see a man who cleans up messes. But you don't see the man who knows how to fix things. You don't see the man who understands that true cleanliness isn't just about appearance, it's about order, about purpose, about making something broken whole again." My gaze locked with his, and for a fleeting moment, I saw a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes, surprise, perhaps even a hint of recognition. "This isn't about cleaning a house, Mr. Peter," I declared, my voice echoing slightly in the cavernous space. "This is about cleaning up a misconception. Your misconception. You think you can dismiss me, insult me, and expect me to just accept it. Well, I won't." I turned my back on him, a bold, defiant gesture that drew gasps from the crowd. I walked towards the nearest door, a heavy oak portal leading into what I assumed was the main drawing room. "I accept your challenge," I announced, my voice ringing with newfound conviction. "But understand this. I'm not doing this for you. I'm not doing this for a marriage proposal. That's nothing more than a cruel taunt. I'm doing this to prove a point. I'm doing this to show you, and everyone here, that a man's worth isn't determined by his job title or his bank account. It's determined by his character, his resilience, and his refusal to be defined by the judgment of others." The air crackled with unspoken tension. Christian Peter, the titan of industry, was being challenged by a janitor, and the entire city's elite were witnesses. The clock was ticking. 60 minutes. The mansion was vast, impossibly grand, and utterly daunting. My meager supplies felt like a cruel joke against the sheer scale of the task. But as I pushed open the drawing room door, a strange calm settled over me. It wasn't just about cleaning. It was about reclaiming something I had lost, something Christian Peter, in all his arrogance, had tried to steal: my dignity. The drawing room was a monument to excess. Gilded furniture, velvet drapes the color of dried blood, ornate chandeliers that cast a warm, heavy glow, and priceless art adorning every wall. It was beautiful, yes, but also suffocating, laden with the scent of old money and stale secrets. My initial survey was a rapid assessment, a mental triage. Dust lay thick on every surface, a testament to infrequent, perfunctory cleanings by staff who likely felt as invisible as I was supposed to. Smudges marred the polished wood of the grand piano, and faint footprints tracked across the Persian rug. The air itself felt heavy, stagnant. My strategy had to be flawless, brutally efficient. I couldn't afford to waste a single second. I quickly retrieved my vacuum cleaner from the cart I'd brought, its motor a familiar, comforting hum against the unnerving silence. I started with the rug, the largest contiguous surface, its intricate patterns a daunting canvas. The vacuum devoured the dust, its suction pulling up not just dirt, but the gething weight of Christian Peter's contempt. I moved with a precision born of years of practice. My movements economical, my focus absolute. Each sweep was a deliberate act of defiance, each pull of the vacuum a step towards reclaiming my agency. As I worked, I began to hear the murmurs from the foyer, the hushed speculation of the onlookers. They were betting, I knew, on my failure. Christian Peter's wager was a public spectacle, and they were eager to witness the downfall of the humble janitor. But I wasn't thinking about them. I was thinking about the impossible deadline, about the sheer volume of work. And then, a new element entered the equation, an unexpected complication that threatened to derail everything. The door to the drawing room creaked open again. It was Christian Peter, his presence a palpable intrusion. He stood silhouetted against the light of the foyer, a predator observing his prey. His eyes, cold and assessing, scanned the room, taking in my frantic efforts. "Still at it, Arthur?" he drawled, his voice laced with a mocking amusement. "You look determined. A shame it's all for naught." He sauntered in, his expensive shoes making no sound on the plush carpet, a stark contrast to the grimy tread of my work boots. He picked up a delicate porcelain figurine from a side table, twirling it between his fingers. You know, this piece alone is worth more than your annual salary. A single slip, a moment's distraction, and it shatters, much like your chances of success here. He deliberately placed it back, a calculated move to increase the pressure. His presence was a distraction, a deliberate attempt to unnerve me. I could feel his eyes on my back, dissecting my every move. The pressure intensified. My hands, usually steady, felt a tremor begin. This was precisely what he wanted, but I couldn't let him win. Not now. I forced myself to breathe deeply, to focus on the task at hand. Just observing, Mr. Peter? I asked, my voice deliberately calm, even as my heart pounded. Or did you come to offer some helpful advice? Perhaps you could tell me where you keep the industrial-grade cleaning supplies? Or maybe you could lend a hand. I dared to meet his gaze, a flicker of challenge in my own eyes. He let out a short, sharp laugh. Help? My dear Arthur, my hands are far too valuable for such manual labor. Besides, where's the fun in that? I prefer to watch the spectacle unfold. To see how a man breaks when faced with an impossible task. He continued his slow, deliberate tour of the room, picking up objects, running his finger along surfaces, his actions subtly designed to point out potential imperfections, to sow seeds of doubt. He paused by a large oil painting, a dark, brooding landscape. He ran his finger along the ornate frame. Dusty, he stated flatly, just as I suspected. You're missing things, Arthur. You're missing the details. He was right, of course. I was rushing, trying to cover as much ground as possible. But details were his specialty. His empire was built on finding the tiny flaws in a competitor's plan, the overlooked clause in a contract, the hidden weakness. And now he was applying that same predatory instinct to my impossible task. The clock was a relentless beast, its seconds ticking away with agonizing speed. I estimated I had already used 15 minutes of my precious hour. The drawing room alone could take that long, and there were dozens more rooms. Despair began to creep in, a cold tendril wrapping around my resolve. Was this it? Was I going to fail, just as he predicted? Was I going to be humiliated in front of everyone, my reputation in tatters? I glanced at Christian Peter. He was watching me, a smug satisfaction beginning to settle on his features. He knew he had me. He saw the doubt etched on my face, the slight faltering in my movements. But then, a memory surfaced. A memory of my grandfather, a carpenter, his hands rough but his touch gentle. He'd always said, Arthur, the most important tool isn't the hammer or the saw. It's the mind behind them. Plan, adapt, and never let the size of the job overwhelm the size of your will. He had built houses, strong and sturdy, with nothing but his skill and his determination. And I was his grandson. Christian Peter had underestimated not just me, but the legacy I carried. I took another deep breath, the stale air filling my lungs. I looked at Christian Peter, a challenge in my eyes. You're right, Mr. Peter. I am missing details. But unlike you, I have a plan to fix it. I walked over to my cleaning cart, ignoring his expectant gaze. I rummaged through my supplies. Most of it was standard. But then, my fingers brushed against something unexpected, something I always carried for emergencies, a forgotten habit from my younger, more resourceful days. A small, almost invisible microfiber cloth, specially treated for polishing delicate surfaces. It was a relic from my first janitorial job, a job where I'd learned that even the smallest, most unassuming tool could make a world of difference. I pulled out the microfiber cloth. Christian Peter watched with a puzzled expression. And what, pray tell, is that supposed to accomplish? He asked, his tone laced with skepticism. This, I said, walking towards the grand piano, is about precision. You see dust. You see smudges. I see an opportunity to make something truly shine. I approached the piano, its dark, lacquered surface reflecting the opulent room like a mirror. I began to polish, not with the frantic energy of before, but with a deliberate, almost meditative focus. The microfiber cloth, designed for optical lenses, glided effortlessly, lifting away the dust and grime Christian Peter had so readily pointed out. The surface began to gleam, not just clean, but with a deep, lustrous shine that seemed to emanate from within. It was a stark contrast to the more generalized cleaning I'd been doing. This was targeted, meticulous. I moved from the piano to the ornate frames of the paintings, then to the glass surfaces of display cabinets. Each stroke was economical. Each wipe left a streak-free finish. I was working smarter, not just harder. I was using the right tool for the right job, a lesson Christian Peter, for all his business acumen, seemed to have forgotten in his pursuit of scale and dominance. Christian Peter watched, his smug expression slowly fading, replaced by a look of genuine, if grudging, interest. He had expected me to panic, to flail, to demonstrate my inadequacy. Instead, I was demonstrating a different kind of skill, a quiet competence, an ability to adapt and overcome. The onlookers, too, had fallen silent, their earlier chatter ceasing as they witnessed this subtle but significant shift. They saw the gleam appearing on surfaces that had been dull moments before. They saw the transformation. My focus narrowed to a laser point. I moved through the drawing room with renewed purpose. I knew I couldn't possibly clean the entire mansion to this level of detail in the remaining time, but I could make a significant impact. I could demonstrate a level of care and precision that Christian Peter had clearly never associated with a janitor. I worked with a rhythm, a dance between my tools and the surfaces I cleaned. The vacuum roared through the main areas, clearing the bulk of the dust. Then, the microfiber cloth came out for the finer details, the polished wood, the glass, the metal accents on furniture. I even took a moment to straighten a collection of antique books on a shelf, arranging them by height, a small act of order that spoke volumes. Christian Peter remained for a few more minutes, his initial amusement replaced by a growing unease. He was accustomed to being in control, to dictating the terms of every interaction. Here, he was witnessing something unexpected, something beyond his comprehension. He saw not a groveling servant, but a man executing a task with quiet, dignity, and unexpected expertise. The sneer on his face had completely vanished, replaced by a thoughtful frown. He finally turned, his departure as abrupt as his arrival. "Don't think this changes anything, Arthur," he said, his voice lacking its earlier bite, more a statement of fact than a threat. "The clock is still ticking." He left, and the silence that followed felt different, charged, expectant. The guests remained, their eyes now fixed on me, no longer with pity or amusement, but with a growing sense of fascination. I was no longer just the janitor. I was the protagonist in an unfolding drama. With Christian Peter gone, the atmosphere in the drawing room shifted again. The oppressive weight of his scrutiny lifted, allowing me to focus more intensely on the task. I knew I had maybe 30 minutes left, 30 minutes to tackle the rest of the mansion. It was still an impossible feat. But Christian Peter's comment about missing details had sparked an idea, a risky gamble. He saw himself as a master strategist, someone who exploited weaknesses. I needed to exploit his own assumptions. He assumed I would approach this linearly, room by room, a futile endeavor. But he didn't know my history, my skills, my determination. He saw a janitor. He didn't see the man who had once, out of necessity, managed to keep a rundown apartment building habitable with minimal resources. He didn't see the man who understood the flow of a space, the importance of first impressions, the power of strategic cleanliness. I moved to the next room, a formal dining hall. Massive oak table, high-backed chairs, a sideboard laden with silver. Again, dust, faint smudges on the chairs, a general lack of polish. I deployed the vacuum, its efficiency a comfort. But then, I made a choice. Instead of meticulously cleaning every single surface, I focused on the most visible areas. I ensured the table gleamed. The floor beneath it was immaculate. The main chandelier sparkled. I made sure the presentation was striking, that the room looked clean from the doorway, from a casual glance. It was a calculated risk. I was sacrificing depth for breadth. I was banking on the illusion of perfection, on Christian Peter's own superficiality. He cared about appearances, about the grand statement. He wouldn't be inspecting the undersides of chair legs or the forgotten corners of the sideboard unless he had a specific reason to. My goal was to create an overwhelming impression of cleanliness, to make the mansion feel immaculate, even if a forensic inspection might reveal minor oversights. I moved on, adopting this accelerated strategy. The library, a room filled with towering shelves of ancient tomes. I didn't have time to dust each book. Instead, I focused on the central reading area, ensuring the leather chairs were wiped down, the coffee table polished, the rug vacuumed. I straightened the books on the shelves, creating an illusion of order. It wasn't perfect, but it was convincing. I glanced at my watch. 20 minutes left. The pressure was immense, a physical weight in my chest. My hands were starting to ache. My muscles screamed in protest. But the adrenaline, fueled by Christian Peter's arrogance and my own stubborn refusal to yield, kept me going. I was in a race against time, a race against a man who believed he had already won. I sprinted through the West Wing, hitting the key rooms. A ballroom, a series of smaller sitting rooms, a music room. My approach was consistent: vacuum the main floor space, polish the most prominent surfaces, straighten any clutter. I was no longer just cleaning. I was staging, creating a facade of immaculate order. It was a performance, and the mansion was my stage. The fear of failure was still there, a constant hum beneath the surface, but it was now tempered by a surge of exhilaration. I was doing it. I was defying the odds, defying Christian Peter. I was proving that a janitor's skills extended far beyond the mundane. They involved strategy, efficiency, and a deep understanding of perception. My final sweep was through the main staircase and the grand foyer, the very place where this insane challenge had begun. I ran the vacuum up the plush runner, ensuring it was free of any debris. I polished the banister until it gleamed, a streak of light against the dark wood. I gave the large, ornate mirror at the foot of the stairs a final wipe, ensuring my own reflection, tired, sweaty, but resolute, looked back at me clearly. 10 minutes left. I took a moment, leaning against the cool marble of the wall, catching my breath. My body ached, my lungs burned, but my mind was sharp, focused. I had covered an impossible amount of ground. It wasn't perfect, not by Christian Peter's exacting standards, but it was clean. It was presentable. It was a testament to sheer will and strategic execution. I could hear the murmur of voices from the foyer, the excited whispers of the guests. They were waiting. Christian Peter was waiting. The air was thick with anticipation. I picked up my cart, the familiar weight a grounding presence. I walked back towards the foyer, my steps steady, my head held high. The clock on the wall showed just under 5 minutes remaining. I surveyed the grand entrance hall. Dust motes still danced in the sunbeams, but they seemed less like an indictment and more like incidental particles in a space that was now, undeniably, clean. The marble floor gleamed. The mahogany console table was polished to a mirror finish. The large vase of flowers, which I'd briefly straightened, stood proud and vibrant. It was ready. I had done it. I had cleaned the mansion. Or, at least, I had presented it in a state that Christian Peter, in his arrogance, would be forced to acknowledge. He wouldn't be looking for flaws, he'd be looking for an excuse to dismiss my success. But I had given him nothing to latch onto, not easily. I had played his game, and I had won. The final minutes ticked by. I stood by the entrance to the drawing room, my cart at my side, a silent sentinel. The guests had gathered, a sea of expectant faces. And then, Christian Peter emerged from a side room, his expression unreadable. He walked slowly into the foyer, his eyes scanning, assessing. He paused, his gaze lingering on the polished surfaces, the neat arrangement of the flowers, the immaculate staircase. The silence was deafening. He hadn't expected this. He had expected a mess, a failure, a confirmation of his prejudice. But all he saw was cleanliness. An hour ago, this place had been a symbol of his power. Now, it was a stage for my quiet victory. He finally turned to me, his winter storm eyes meeting mine. The smirk was gone, replaced by something I couldn't quite decipher. Was it respect? Annoyance? Or perhaps a grudging acknowledgement of the impossible I had just achieved? He looked at the document on the table, then back at me. The game was far from over. But for this moment, this one impossible hour, I had met his challenge and emerged, not unscathed, but unbroken. The true battle, I suspected, was just beginning. I had cleaned the mansion, but the real task was yet to come, navigating the consequences of proving a powerful man wrong. This was more than just a cleaning job. It was a declaration. A declaration that Arthur Finch was not to be underestimated. This was the point where Christian Peter was supposed to have me cornered, begging, defeated. He'd orchestrated this entire scenario for his own amusement, a twisted display of power for his sycophantic audience. But he'd miscalculated. He'd seen the uniform, the tools, the humble demeanor, and assumed he understood the man. He'd failed to account for the fire that burns in anyone who's been pushed too far for too long. He'd failed to account for a hidden past, a life lived in the shadows of expectation, a life that had taught me the true meaning of resilience. My years of quiet, service, of being invisible, had been a crucible. They had forged in me a patience, a meticulousness, and a deep-seated understanding of order that transcended mere tidiness. I knew, instinctively, how to make a space feel right, feel clean, feel respected. The clock on the ornate mantelpiece chimed. The final chime resonated through the foyer, a triumphant announcement. Exactly 60 minutes. I hadn't rushed through the task with panicked haste. Instead, I had moved with a focused intensity, a controlled energy. Each action had been deliberate. The vacuum cleaner, though noisy, had been my primary weapon against the pervasive dust. I'd strategically moved through the main living areas, prioritizing high-traffic zones and visible surfaces. The drawing room, the dining hall, the library. These were the rooms guests would see, the rooms that defined the grandeur of Peter Manor. I'd made sure they looked impeccable. The floors gleamed, the furniture surfaces reflected the light, the air felt fresher, less heavy. But it wasn't just about brute force cleaning. It was about finesse. The microfiber cloth, a small but potent tool, had been my secret weapon for the finer details. The piano, the antique frames, the glass cabinets. These were the elements that elevated a space from merely clean to truly polished. I'd used it with precision, ensuring a streak-free finish that spoke of care and attention. It was the kind of detail that a hurried, indifferent cleaner would miss. It was the kind of detail Christian Peter, with his focus on the bottom line, would likely overlook in his own life, yet demand from others. The guests had gathered in the foyer, a silent, expectant crowd. Their faces, a moment ago filled with schadenfreude, now held a palpable curiosity, a flicker of surprise. Christian Peter stood near the grand staircase, his arms no longer crossed, his posture slightly less rigid. His eyes, those icy blue chips, were sweeping over the space, not with disdain, but with a critical, almost analytical gaze. He was looking for the flaws, the missed spots, the evidence of my inadequacy. But I had anticipated his scrutiny. I hadn't just cleaned, I had presented. I had arranged, straightened, and polished with an eye for visual impact. The illusion of perfection was strong. Well, Arthur? Christian Peter's voice was quieter now, stripped of its earlier bombast. The challenge remained, but the tone had shifted. It was less a taunt, more a demand for explanation. He was clearly taken aback. He had expected a crumpled heap of sweat and failure. He had gotten competence, more than competence, in fact. He had gotten a demonstration of skill that he couldn't easily dismiss. He walked slowly towards the console table near the entrance. He ran a finger along its polished surface. I held my breath. He paused, then looked at his fingertip. It came away clean. A small, almost imperceptible nod. He moved towards the grand piano. He didn't touch it, but his gaze lingered on its gleaming surface. He knew I had paid attention to the details. The guests began to murmur, a low hum of disbelief and speculation. They had witnessed the impossible. A janitor, given an impossible task by the city's most powerful CEO, had not only completed it but had done so with an impressive display of efficiency and skill. This was more than just a cleaning job. It was a disruption of the established order. Christian Peter, the man who dictated terms, who reveled in his control, had been challenged and, in a way, bested. He had underestimated the resourcefulness born of necessity, the quiet dignity of hard work, and the hidden depths within a man he had so readily dismissed. My heart was still pounding, a frantic rhythm against my ribs, but it was no longer the drumbeat of fear. It was the thrum of adrenaline, of defiance, of a quiet triumph. I had faced his arrogance head-on, not with anger, but with action. I had shown him that a man's Worth isn't measured by the title on his business card or the price tag on his suit, but by his character, his determination, and his ability to rise to an impossible challenge. Christian Peter finally turned his full attention to me. The smirk was gone, replaced by a look that was difficult to read. It wasn't outright admiration, but it was certainly not the triumphant disdain he had started with. You actually did it, he stated, the words heavy with disbelief. He looked around the foyer, his gaze sweeping over the gleaming surfaces, the organized space. It was undeniable. The mansion, in its most crucial areas, was impeccably clean. An hour, he murmured, almost to himself. It's astonishing. He walked over to the mahogany table where the pre-drawn contract lay, the symbol of his cruel wager. He picked it up, the heavy paper feeling significant in his hand. He looked at it, then back at me. The weight of the moment settled over us. He had made a promise, a public, humiliating wager. And now, he had to reckon with the consequences of his own arrogance. He had underestimated the janitor. He had underestimated Arthur Finch. And in doing so, he had created a situation far more complex, far more interesting than he had ever intended. The challenge was met. The task was complete. But the real story, the story of what happened next, was just beginning to unfold. The air in the foyer crackled, not just with the lingering scent of polish, but with the potent energy of a world turned momentarily upside down. He had set a trap, but I had turned it into a stage. And the audience, the elite of the city, was watching, captivated by the spectacle he had inadvertently created. He had offered a marriage proposal born of pure contempt. Now, he had to face the reality of that offer, a reality he had never truly considered. My clean mansion was his undeniable defeat. Christian Peter's icy gaze remained locked on mine, a silent battle of wills in the stunned silence. The contract lay between us, a heavy testament to his hubris and my impossible victory. He finally broke eye contact, his gaze flicking back to the contract, then to the assembled guests, who were now a buzzing hive of speculation. The carefully constructed facade of Christian Peter, the unflappable CEO, had cracked. He had made a bet, a public spectacle, and the janitor had won. The implication of the contract, the absurd proposal to marry me, hung in the air, a ticking time bomb of social ruin for him. He was a man who lived by his reputation, his control, his carefully curated image of power. To be bested, especially by someone he had so contemptuously dismissed, was a wound far deeper than any business loss. This is preposterous. He finally managed, his voice tight, the smooth veneer of authority strained. He gestured vaguely at the contract, then at me. You think I meant this literally? A binding agreement? Don't be a fool. His attempt to backtrack, to dismiss the entire event as a mere jest, was clumsy, transparent. The guests exchanged knowing glances. They had heard the words, seen the intensity of the challenge. Christian Peter did not make idle threats, nor did he offer absurd proposals without a carefully calculated purpose. You said, clean this mansion in 1 hour, and I'll marry you. I replied, my voice calm, unwavering. I walked towards the table, my steps deliberate. I picked up the contract, its embossed crest feeling significant in my hand. You offered a wager, Mr. Peter, with terms, and I accepted. I fulfilled my end of the bargain. I held the contract up, letting the light catch the Peter Enterprises seal. The question now is, will you uphold yours? A wave of hushed whispers swept through the crowd. They were witnessing a titan brought low, a powerful man cornered by his own words. Christian Peter's face flushed, a rare display of raw emotion. His eyes narrowed, and for a moment, I saw the predator beneath the expensive suit, the ruthlessness that had built his empire. He clearly preferred to see me humiliated, begging for mercy, not standing here, holding him to his word. You think you've won something here, Arthur? He spat, his voice regaining some of its edge. A meaningless piece of paper? A hollow victory built on a misunderstanding? This contract is void. It was a test of your capabilities, nothing more. A demonstration of how far you were from meeting any real standard. A test? I echoed, a slow smile spreading across my face. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the crack in his armor wide enough to expose the truth. You presented it as a marriage proposal, Mr. Peter. A contract for marriage, contingent on my success. You didn't say it was a test. You didn't say it was a demonstration. You offered a prize for a specific task. And I delivered. You are a businessman, are you not? Do you make contracts, offer wagers, and then simply declare them void when they don't suit your narrative? The crowd leaned in, captivated. This was far more entertaining than any social gathering they had ever attended. They were watching Christian Peter, the untouchable CEO, squirm under the scrutiny of a janitor. His reputation, the very foundation of his power, was being challenged in real time. This is absurd, Christian Peter repeated, his voice rising. I will not be dictated to by a cleaner. You set the terms, Mr. Peter, I stated, my voice steady. You challenged me. You publicly declared the stakes. You have built your empire on deals, on contracts, on promises. And now, when faced with the consequences of your own words, you try to retract them. That is not the behavior of a man of integrity. That is the behavior of a coward. The word hung in the air, sharp and undeniable. Coward. It was a powerful accusation, especially leveled at a man like Christian Peter, a man who projected an image of unwavering strength. His face contorted with rage, but he was trapped. He couldn't lash out physically without causing a scandal that would dwarf this one. He couldn't dismiss me with a wave of his hand, not after I had so thoroughly dismantled his flimsy excuses. You will regret this, Finch, he snarled, his eyes blazing. You have made a very powerful enemy. Perhaps, I conceded, my smile widening. But tonight, I also made a very public demonstration. I showed that a man's worth is not determined by his station, but by his actions. You saw a janitor. You saw someone to humiliate. But you failed to see the man who would meet your impossible challenge. You failed to see the man who would hold you accountable. You underestimated me, Mr. Peter. And that, I believe, is your greatest mistake. I carefully placed the contract back on the table, leaving it for him to contemplate. The guests remained silent, watching, waiting to see what Christian Peter would do. He stood there, rigid, his mind clearly racing, trying to salvage his reputation from the wreckage of his own arrogance. He had wanted a spectacle, and he had gotten one, just not in the way he had intended. He had wanted to crush me. Instead, I had exposed his own vulnerability. This isn't over, he finally declared, his voice a low growl. He turned abruptly, his expensive suit swishing around him, and strode out of the foyer, leaving a trail of stunned silence and palpable tension. The guests watched him go, their eyes then turning back to me, a mixture of awe and bewilderment on their faces. I was no longer invisible. I was the janitor who had faced down the CEO and won. I looked around at the assembled faces, the elite of the city, their assumptions shattered. They had come expecting to witness a simple act of humiliation, a fleeting moment of amusement at the expense of a lower-class worker. Instead, they had witnessed a profound lesson in integrity, in resilience, and in the unpredictable nature of fate. Christian Peter had tried to use his power to break me, but in doing so, he had inadvertently given me the platform to expose his own weaknesses. My victory wasn't just about cleaning a mansion. It was about cleaning away the prejudiced notions of a man who believed himself superior. The air in the foyer, once heavy with unspoken judgment, now felt charged with possibility. The impossible had happened. A wager, born of malice and arrogance, had been fulfilled. The contract remained on the table, a silent testament to the unexpected turn of events. Whether Christian Peter would honor it or try to bury it and me with it remained to be seen. But for now, for this one extraordinary hour, the janitor had proven that true power lies not in wealth or status, but in integrity and the courage to stand firm against those who seek to diminish you. What do you think Christian Peter will do next? Will he honor his word, or will he try to silence Arthur Finch forever? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story of unexpected triumph, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more tales of resilience and the unexpected. Your engagement fuels these stories, so share your reactions and join the conversation.